Today I'm going to rank every single card in Clash Royale from worst to best. Coming in at the worst card in Clash Royale, the Furnace. Why is this the worst card? Because every single other building, even the other 4 elixir buildings, are much better. You're throwing wet paper towels at your opponents. That's what you're doing. That's effectively it. Ever since the addition to tower troops, Furnace has got even worse. Somehow that's possible. And Barb Hut, the next on the list, actually gets value sometimes. Like once. Speak of the devil, the Barb Hut. This thing is way too expensive. Normal barbarians suck. So a building that spawns less barbarians that costs more is also gonna suck. So you can get the same amount of value or kill the same amount of things with the cannon and some other combination of broken cycle cards that you can with the Barb Hut. It sucks. Minion Horde 118. This card stinks. In the rare occasion that you arrows like something else and then he just plays a minion horde and you have 0 elixir and can't play anything, it will get value. That never happens. This card really sucks. If the minion horde gets value every 120 times you play it, the clone is like 119. This thing gets so if beatdown's getting countered by all the brand new evolutions, clone is even worse. Arrows, poison, there's like 76 cards that counter clone. It's not viable and it just hogs up a spot you could use another spell or troop in. Next up are barbs, and it's important to realize that we're not ranking the Evos. Evo ranking is an entirely separate video. You can go criticize my ranking on that video. Barbs are not a good option because almost the role they play as a swarm card, they're too heavy, they're too squishy, and they don't give you offensive value. It's really not hard to deal with barbs. The first time your opponent figures out you have barbs, maybe they'll get value. But after that, it's really hard to consistently play them, and they're expensive on top of not providing offensive value and hogging up a slot. You could use something good like guards or goblin gang in for pretty much the same value. 3 musketeers. I'm not exactly I'm not sad that these are this bad, and I don't want to see them get an Evo or anything. That would be the end of my days as a lava player. But 3 musketeers, really just not consistent. They always give your opponent positive spell value, and you're better off just running an extra bridge spam card than 3 musketeers. They don't do much at all ever, and that's why most bridge spam cards or decks would rather just have another card that's better at spamming the bridge. Mirror, how was okay. Riley has a mirror deck. It's kind of fun, and it kind of works because of the new thing with the underleveled log not killing things that it should. It's still not a good card. Don't put mirror in your deck, please. It's oftentimes just never gonna do what you want it to do. It costs an extra elixir, and maybe if it costed the same elixir, we'd see it probably do a little bit better, but I don't know. The mirror is just, it hasn't been used in a deck in a very long time. The Goon Giant. Shout out to Abdude for telling the devs to buff this card and making it the most broken thing we've ever seen ever. And then they had to emergency nerf. Did they emergency nerf it? I don't know. I like trauma blocked it, the Rune Giant meta out of my life. The Rune Giant is just not worth it anymore because the buff, she dies too easily and the buff just doesn't stay around. For 4 elixir, and you're hogging up a win condition spot. She doesn't play any defense as well, so you're actively harming the rest of your deck by not giving you an extra defensive card. She doesn't do any damage, and she's effectively just a stinky ice golem for 2 extra elixir. Elite barbs are a little better than the normal barbs because what the barbs lack is offensive threat. I guess if your opponent's at 0, like, whatever. The elite barbarians are better on offense, and I guess a little bit better on defense too, except they're really expensive. So you only really see them in Goblin Giant Sparky because they provide that extra threat that you have to deal with on top of everything else in that deck. But really outside of that deck, they're nowhere to be seen. They're really easy to deal with for the most part. They're just kind of scary behind a Goblin Giant. But most of the time you can counter that deck and it's not even that good in the meta. E-barbs just get countered way too easily. Yo, the Wizard is so bad he drags back the Evo Wizard's ranking. Like the Evo Wizard would be better if he wasn't so pitifully bad. Just think about it, like every other option you could use instead of the Wizard is better than the Wizard. That's a big part in these rankings. Maybe the overall card strength, like just on a linear graph, is fine. Like, hey, the Wizard gets the job done in, you know, half the arenas in the game, but you could be doing the job better with every single other ranged support card in the game. So Skeleton Army. Now this fan favorite is really just inconsistent. Sometimes the skeleton army actually gets great value, but the problem is it's really squishy. And when you have something like guards and goblin gang dominating the meta, same elixir, gets more offensive value, gets more defensive value, stays alive longer, baits better, it's a no-brainer. The skeleton army is too easily killed and can be replaced by guards and goblin gang and also every other little swarm guard in the game. So really its biggest knock is it just dies too easily. Enter exactly what I said about the wizard except for the witch, because she's a little bit better. She's gotten really nice with the splash buff. That really helped her out, but the problem is she's just a bad card. The other problem, her Evo is like really strong. So the normal witch is actually not that good, but a ton of people use her because of the Evo being so broken. And that's why the witch has a really high use rate, even though as a normal card, just kind of ass. Minions. Enter what I said about the minion horde, except for the minions, because they're cheaper, so it's less detrimental when they instantly die. Think bats, but a lot worse because they get less damage and die easier. The bats, they're just infinitely better than the minions, and they're cheaper, and they're zap bait. The minions, although they have decent damage, just died way too easily with the excess of splash units in the meta. Skelly Barrel. Now, the Skelly Barrel's interesting feature is it literally just, like, gets impact damage guaranteed unless your opponent has a building. That's cool. It's decent. It's just not a reliable win condition. However, the Evo is really good. So once again, the use rate of this card's going way up, but that's just because how good the evolution is. As a base card, Skeleton Barrel is pretty mid, one of the worst win cons in the game. Giant Skeleton is really fun to play, but he's really too expensive. Oftentimes, he's going to get distracted by cards that are way cheaper. His Death Bomb doesn't really end up getting too much value because your opponent will usually, hey, Giant Skeleton on the board, we've got to not give him Death Bomb value. If this guy reaches the tower, if he's good. Too bad that never happens. Sparky! Sparky's really, like, if you're playing, like, log bait with no big spell or something, Sparky gets really hard to deal with. However, it's usually pretty easy to counter, it's very slow, and also it costs a ton of elixir, and it's a big commitment. So a lot of the time, opponent plays Sparky, you pressure, they have to respond to the pressure, Sparky ends up dying. If you could support a whole big Sparky push, you could win, but it's a lot of ifs. Next up is the freeze. The freeze, it's just not, the freeze is, it's really too inconsistent. It's 4 elixir, which is a big commitment. You've got to get your opponent in a spot where freeze will knowingly, like, change the game. You win off the freeze, because if you don't, you're just stalling your opponent out so they can build a bigger counter push. And freeze is taking up the spot of something else in the deck. Usually, since it's a spell, it's taking up the spell spot, so now you're going to have a tougher time dealing with big chunky units. Electro Dragon is really not that good because of how easy it is to stop. You practically, the non-Evo version, that is. The Evo version is decent because it just chains infinitely. This thing isn't even good at dealing with swarms. That's the problem. It's horrible against single target, and it's horrible against swarms. I guess if you have, like, a giant Sparky push, who has those nowadays? It would be good. But the problem is it doesn't deal with swarms well. It doesn't have enough, like, health to deal with ranged cards, and it just sits there and gets no value most of the time. Battle Healer struggles to find opportunities to actually heal. Now, it only really works in egolem. It's like she was designed to just boost egolem. Outside of egolem, she doesn't really do anything, and she never gets an opportunity to really heal, which is why she's not used in any other deck other than egolem, and most of the time gets no offensive value either. I guess if you have a Battle Healer and a Mirror Battle Healer and a Heal Spirit, things could get dicey. But Elixir Collector, this card is countered really easily by Earthquake, which is really popular, and also it's really hard to, like, get good value out of your pumps when there's so much spam in the meta. Spam. You pump, you're down a bunch of elixir. You can't possibly deal with all the spam well, and that's why pump is only successful in very few decks, such as, like, pump bow and bridge spam, where they kind of feed off of getting pressured. The big sneaky golem. It's really bad because beatdown is really easy to counter in the current meta. Golem would probably be better if beatdown was better, but there were actually 0 golems in the top 200 last season, which is insane. The base mortar sucks. Evo mortar, whole nother story. Love that card. The base mortar, you've probably seen people, like, trying their hardest to spend 25 elixir to get 1 mortar shot. That's really how it be, and it applies virtually no pressure. You're only playing it to cycle to your Evo mortar. I don't care what anybody says. Void is actually super niche, and in certain situations, Void sucks. And that's a good thing. Void is really bad, and you'd rather have arrows in almost every other situation. Also, once your opponent knows you have Void, it will never get the value we got the first time, even if you can get value out of a Void. The card is dead, as it should be. This is really weird, because I like Night Witch as a card. She's good, but the problem is, decks that have a Night Witch in them are in the cellar. They're in the cellar of the basement. Beatdown is really bad in the meta, especially ground beatdown outside of that one Goblin Giant P.E.K.K.A deck. So Night Witch, all the decks that she's in, except maybe Giant Graveyard, she really struggles to get good value in and kind of dies to all this anti-splash. Like if bait's really good, you're going to have anti-splash, and that directly impacts the Night Witch as well. Egolem is not that good, even though sometimes you get absolutely rolled by Egolem because you don't have a good matchup. The Egolem player is essentially coin flipping every single game because they can't outplay anything. You really can't outplay with Egolem. You just, if you get good matchup, you win good matchup. You get bad matchup, you lose bad matchup. That's kind of how it goes, and Egolem has more bad matchups than good matchups. So the base Executioner always has sucked ever since his release. I mean, he had that one Halloween party where he was the most broken thing we've ever seen, and then outside of that has just been ass. Evo, great. Executioner, yeah, he's better than like the Witch because he gets more consistent value, and he's better against Swarms. He has like a more designated role, but still, it's really easy to counter the base Executioner and to play like not into it. Turbo Tax. So really, outside of the Evo, the card is practically useless. 94, we've got the Tombstone. This card really sucks. I don't want to hear anybody say, oh, I got value with the Tombstone one time. It's outdated. Neat prop. I would love to see it get an Evo, but Tombstone just consistently like underperforms. I get it's only 3 elixir, but usually you're better off running like a cannon or list any other building in the game over this, but not a furnace though. The Goblin Barrel is countered by like 82 cards, and it kind of sucks. I'm not going to lie. The only reason Bait is really good is because of its boosted Evos and the Goblin Gang being like one of the best cards to ever touch the game. Goblin Barrel Evo, really strong. Dual lane pressure, it's hard to deal with. But normal barrel will almost never get damage. You can't even, it's hard even to outcycle your opponent's barrel counter. So you're never going to get really good value with the normal barrel unless you do a really good job at cycling out the counters. Mini Pecker, this guy doesn't really live up to other mini tanks. He's not a mini tank, and he's not a damage dealer. He's kind of like a hybrid, and there's no room for hybrids because you don't need it. There's no room. There's just the meta doesn't have a place for the mini P.E.K.K.A, and that shows in his statistics and the fact that you'd probably rather just have a girthy tank most of the time. Although it's kind of cool if you can get a mini P.E.K.K.A hit on the tower. The base Zap kind of stinks as a spell. Again, the Evo, really awesome. We love the Evo Zap. The normal Zap is just, comparing it to other spells, not really it. I mean, it's nice to have that reset. It's nice to have that instant placement so you can kill things like bats. You can hover your Zap, but it's okay. Don't even get me started on the base archers, man. God, I'm skip. Rascal's got a buff. So the guy now does more damage, which actually is pretty decent. The card is gone from the cellar to coming up the basement stairs. The card is, the girls died a log. So oftentimes you're still paying for a fat knight that does less damage, but now he does more damage. So you're still paying for a fat knight. You're just paying 2 extra elixir for a fat knight. The heal spirit deadass gets value sometimes. It's still the worst spirit though. Expo as a card is not the craziest thing we've ever seen. I'm not shocked by the Expo being super low on the list. However, it's carried by its Evos. It's really carried by its Evos and the fact that you can outplay and kind of stall once you get an Expo lock. The card itself is just really, really bad. This is why we never pick it in triple draft. I learned that the hard way. Zappies! Yippee! Zappies are so awesome. They stun lock things sometimes, which is really rather cool. The problem being, usually your opponent has a way to get Zappies off the board. And if you have Zappies as your support unit, the problem is they don't do too much damage. So you're going to be left having to make up that roll of extra damage, and that can be detrimental to a lot of decks, which is why they don't fornicate with the Zappies. Mommy Pecker does a lot of damage and applies, I guess, pressure in a vacuum. The idea being that P.E.K.K.A is usually really easy to counter. So even though the Evo is all right, it's not much, doesn't make the P.E.K.K.A much better. The P.E.K.K.A is just overall and kind of in a weird spot. It's good in Goblin Giant. It has been thoroughly and utterly replaced in Bridge Spam in almost every deck. Fire Spirit is barely better than the Heal Spirit because sometimes if you play correctly, you can catch entire goblin gangs, entire bats and stuff, like, and kill them instantly. Problem is that almost never happens. So let's be for real. Goblin giant, again, really carried by its Evo. The normal goblin giant isn't that good. It's also really easy to kill. I don't know why. Do they have the same amount of health? I feel like they do, right? Yeah. I don't know why. Maybe it's just his aura, but the Evo one feels really like hard to kill, and the normal one just like melts instantly. I don't know. It's just like a psychological thing. His health, not that great. Damage, not that great if you can distract the goblins on his back. Ice Golem is got a buff. Is still kind of flying under the radar a little bit, I think. He's decent. The buff doesn't make you use him in any other deck he wasn't already used in. If you're already using a Knight or a Valk, you're not going to switch to playing an Ice Golem. So it's kind of, come on. Musketeer is pretty decent. Honestly, she gets consistent value. She just never flashes. Like, there's flashes where your support troop should be able to win you the entire game. As we get up the support troop rankings, you'll see the support troops have the potential to do more and more and more on offense. Musketeer, good defensive card. Not the craziest, but she's just like a jack of all trades. She's all right. Royal recruits. Honestly, nobody's really scared of the recruits themselves. They're scared of what comes with them. That being the 6 split lane cards and infinite pressure. Really, as a whole, they're not too hard to deal with. Berserker. She's actually like a decent mini tank replacement, which is, I feel like, her role when they released her. Except she probably didn't make any money. So I guess that kind of sucks. But she's a really good new addition to the game. Like, she can handle her own. She's only 2 elixir. She can be a good distraction. She does decent versus swarms. All right. We got our first champion on the list, the Goblinstein. He really fell off, which is a good thing. It's a combination of the 7 nerfs, all justified, and the fact that the other champions are just way better. So obviously, since you can only use 1 champion in a deck, if one is really good, all the others take a hit. And the fact that almost all of them are really good means the Goblinstein's taking a big hit. Bomb Tower! This card is fun, except when you realize you're hitting people with rubber bands. It's not that fun. Usually, when you're going up against piggies and stuff like that, where you're like, hey, I want a bomb tower, you can have the same result, just placing your cards better with Cannon and Nice Spirit and Knight and Skellies and, you know, the whole drill. Magic Archer, he's got a lot of offensive outplay potential, but he's really squishy. He doesn't do that much damage, and oftentimes if your opponent knows he's coming, it can be easy to stop him. Magic Archer NATO is a pain in the ass, but that is a really expensive combo and can be very dangerous for the user if they don't use it properly, because you're just dumping a bunch of elixir down the drain and getting a counter push and die instantly. Goblin Machine! 74 is the Phoenix. Phoenix is a decent air support troop card. It struggles from the same things we've talked about from others. Offensive pressure is like a net 0. You see a Phoenix, you're never really worried about it. Defense, it's all right. The damage isn't extremely high. It does respawn, which is kind of cool. That's kind of why it gets so high of a ranking. But it really just, the damage, nah. The offensive potential, nah. So the rank, nah. Okay, literally exactly what I just said about the Phoenix, but for the ground troop role. The card can full counter drill, actually, which is pretty cool. But other than that, it takes too long to charge. Deadass, this card would jump up like 30 ranks and a ton of usage percentage if it didn't take 15 business days to freaking charge. The Madoish. The Madoish, she's actually, I don't know how certain people face 5 Mother Witches in a row when it hard counters their deck. You know, but she's really good at what she does, stopping bait cards, stopping swarm, or I should say swarm cards. And outside of that, she's really squishy, just like the Magic Archer, but she has the potential to turn an entire game around, so she's all right. E-Giant is really interesting. The card as a whole, I think there's a lot of outplay potential in E-Giant decks, but Electro Giant's just he's kind of easy to stop in this meta, and his deck is clunky and doesn't get too much value against bait. Bait is always typically pretty good against E-Giant, so he's just in an iffy place in the meta. Cannon card is meh. Cannon cart got a buff, which was pretty cool. The cannon cart really, it got a big nerf from not having to like retarget when like an Inferno Dragon is on it. Stuff like that makes it a lot, there's no like hesitation. So a lot of the time the cannon cart doesn't get as many hits as it used to. The Goblin Cage is a decent building that oftentimes gets overshadowed or undershadowed or whatever the name, whatever. It's a defensive building that consistently gets like 4 elixirs worth of value. Sometimes the brawler's an offensive threat. Sometimes the cage does absolutely nothing, which is why it's not higher. But the Diddy cage, its Evo, pretty good because it consistently does more. And also the Goblin Brawler's buffed in that one. So 68, the Lumberjack, he's a pretty decent card. He does consistently like apply really good pressure. He's kind of finicky to pull sometimes too, so it's really scary when there's the Lumberjack at the bridge. But he is pretty squishy, so you know it should be easy enough to counter the Lumberjack, which is why he's not an insane card. Mechamaru, a consistent air card that does a lot of damage, can support the push decently, but the offense is just not there. It's really easy to distract a Mega Minion, and oftentimes killing it from afar is not the biggest challenge in the world either. The Hunter, he is really an underrated card. Ever since he stopped dying to Fireball Zap, he's become more used. Problem is, his range really sucks. So anytime he needs to do anything other than like right up front in front of you, he underperforms. So if the problem is, it's not really worth having that most of the time, although sometimes really fun to play. Electricity, I think that was low-key good. He's okay. He's an all right card. We're getting into the good category. There's a lot of cards. Most of these now are good cards. Electro Wizard, he's actually a pain in the ass sometimes because of his stun, so really underrated in my opinion. Goblin Curse, oh man, I love this thing. Got me my most viewed and liked TikTok video. If you catch somebody that doesn't know you have a curse, oh my god. And the damage amplification, of course, is splendid. Baby D! I don't really think that this card has anything above any of the other support troops except for the fact that it's flying, so it's harder to kill. It's more of a pain in the ass when it's behind a push. And the fact that it has a lot of health and doesn't die to lightning, it makes it... This literally is what carrying it to this rank. It's hard to kill, and the splash is really good. 2 elixir stab goblins are pretty underrated. They're not close to the guards in Goblin Gang, but usually they get way better value than you'd think, and for only 2 elixir can bail you out of some pretty tough spots. Next up is the Royal Delivery, one of my favorite spells in the game, but obviously knacked by the fact that you can't, you know, play it on offense. So oftentimes it's really underrated. It makes defense way easier, but can you really sacrifice having an offensive spell for having a defensive only spell? Goblin Drill is a pretty strong win condition. It fluctuates. It's off and on. Sometimes it's way better than other times. There's a lot of outplay potential with the Goblin Drill though, and it has a built-in baiting aspect. You can play it on defense. It's overall pretty solid win condition. Battle Ram poses a pretty decent threat on offense, and if you can get it charging and get your opponent low on elixir, it becomes really annoying, gets consistent value, and the barbs are often annoying too. It's not even just the charge, you have to respond to the barbs as well. So if you play this card right, it's pretty good. Next up is the Bandit. She's pretty solid on offense, just like the Boss Bandit, and for only 3 elixir can be extremely annoying. Always forces out cards for your opponent to play and can open up other bridge spam cards in your deck. The Princess is pretty annoying because of her exceptionally long range, especially in log bait, because you have to respond to her usually with spells, or she's going to get consistent, very annoying value. Next up is the Tesla. The Tesla is a pretty strong, solid building. It's not like nearly as good as our boy the Cannon, but the Tesla consistently gets good value, has seen a buff, so is gotten better. The Evo is a little bit, we're not talking about the Evo. The normal Tesla is just a solid building, can't go wrong. You can get better, but it oftentimes just does what it needs to do. The Spirit Empress coming up next. I don't have her on this account, I have her on my other account, and I've played and done a video with her, so I have her maxed. But the boss, Spirit Empress, is really, I think it's stronger than we think, but for 6 elixir, it's a really hefty cost. So although it impresses with its damage and the fact that it doesn't die to lightning, it is 6 whole elixir. So in order to get something like a lava push going or a golem push going, it's going to be really hard to also kill the counters that would like distract the Spirit Empress, so it's kind of sometimes hard to use properly. Mega Knight! He's, you know, everybody loves the Mega Knight. He oftentimes gets pretty good value because people don't know how to respond to him properly or don't know how to play against him, and so he oftentimes would like get higher ranking from like an individual bias than he would in actuality, although the Mega Knight, he's not bad. You know, he's not bad. You can oftentimes squeeze a lot of value out of him, even though he's easier to counter on defense than you'd think. 1 elixir skeletons. They're cool. Lava Hound. The card has been heavily impacted by the last like a billion metas having evos that just dominate Lava Hound. And so obviously while the best lava players in the game are still doing particularly well, the card is way better on top ladder than it is anywhere else. And it's kind of a nightmare to play against all these types of matchups in the meta, especially being bait heavy. Bait is a very good counter to lava. Next up is the Eye Tower. It's better than the Tesla because of like what it can do. It has a lower floor than the Tesla, but a higher ceiling, and that ranks it higher than the Tesla. It consistently deals with these big thick units and can even times be good against mini tanks and support troops as well. Overall, it's kind of balanced out by its 5 elixirs, so it can be hard to play, but usually gets pretty good value. The Balloon is also just like the Lava Hound, impacted by the current meta. However, Balloon is also viable in other decks, not just Lava Hound. So although it's all right, it's seen way better days, and it's currently being like dunked on by the meta outside of a few decks like Loon Cycle, which are kind of carried by their evos. Flying Machina is annoying as hell, but if you have the right counter, it's pretty easy to deal with. If you don't have the right counter, good luck. Royal Giant can be a pain in the ass. Can be, unless you're running a ridiculously broken bait or cycle deck, in which case it will never be a pain in your ass. Royal Giant fell off a little bit, but it's still one of the best win conditions I'd recommend for players to pick up in the current day and age. Skeleton Dragons are a good support troop that does a lot of damage, limited only by the fact that they like have brain damage and cannot splash things properly. If they could splash things properly, everybody would be using them. So maybe it's a good thing that they don't. Inferno Dragon is pretty good. Obviously, it can be easy to counter him, but straight up the non-evo version, it's a good card. It oftentimes will do a lot more because it's a walking Eye Tower than the normal Eye Tower will do, and can support your push and be pretty annoying to deal with as well. The Bomber is a solid, cheap support troop that can bail you out of a lot of situations and allow you to be like more risky on offense than you could be, because you can get away with just going with 2 elixir for defense. However, there's virtually no offensive pressure. Earthquake is a pretty solid spell, obviously best with Hog and Hoggies. The problem is outside of that, it's practically useless and you're going to need a big spell. 43 is Firecracker. She's annoying. She does hand you a free King Tower activation usually, but if you don't have the right spell or a fast enough cycle, she's going to get like really, really difficult to deal with. And if you like don't have, the problem is a lot of people do have counters to her, but if you don't, yeah, good luck. Bats are a pretty solid card that zap bait and are really easily going to get you their worth in value, and oftentimes always force out a response, and can be really dangerous on a counter push, especially for only 2 elixirs. So you're getting a lot of value out of just a cheap 2 elixir card. Out of my way! The Ram Rider, it's not as good as the Hog Rider, obviously, not even close, but she is pretty annoying and oftentimes gets good value, can be used on defense, can be really annoying to deal with on offense, and paired in the right decks will force out counters that open up the rest of your deck to get more value. Ice Wizard is one of the best defensive troops in the game. He is consistently strong, no longer needs to be used with NATO ever since his splash buff, and always is a pain in the ass to deal with. If you let your opponent start stacking these up, good luck. The Suspicious Bush. This thing should not do as much damage as it does, but it does. And it's really awkward to deal with, especially in the decks it's good in right now. It's very, very frustrating to try and deal with the Sneaky Bush, and it probably needs a nerf. The Goblin Demolisher, a pretty solid card, especially in drill. Its offensive pressure is undeniable. You always have to respond to this thing or you're taking 700 damage, and it is oftentimes really good on defense as well, because not only does it have decent range, it also blows things up and knocks things back pretty good. Spear Goblins are cheap, get really good offensive pressure, are easy to cycle with, spell bait, and I'm done glazing the Spear Goblins. Wall Breakers for only 2 elixir apply a really tough amount of pressure, can be used to get buildings out, have to be responded to unless you're a lava player, in which case it still hurts to tank them, but you gotta do it. And the Wall Breakers are oftentimes really, really strong for their elixir value. You always have to spend 2 or more to deal with them typically. Next up is the Boss Bandit. She is really annoying, did get a good nerf, but in the right circumstances still just chains together a ridiculous amount of value, is absolutely nerf worthy, and I feel like she should get another one probably, honestly. Boarding! That wasn't good. Strike. That was better. He is really a pain in the ass to deal with. Like, if you don't have the right, like what do you even need for this? An eye drag? Like, if you don't have the right card, the bowler is going to cross the bridge. And if he crosses the bridge, that's where things start to get tricky. Royal Hogs are a pretty solid win condition that also spell bait. Can't go wrong with that. Little Prince is deadass still a pain in the ass because for 3 elixir, you're getting 3 card cycle. That's the biggest thing. You can get 3 elixir, 3 card cycle. That's his biggest buff. And also the fact that you have to commit like an extra spell to him. Like if you're running Fireball, you can't kill him. So he oftentimes forces out more than 3 elixir to deal with, which makes the rest of the deck better. Electro Spirit, a pretty solid spirit that oftentimes always gets value. However, not quite as good as the Ice Spirit. It has opportunities where it's better. They just aren't more than the Ice Spirit's opportunities. Rocket is a good spell that can be very annoying if your opponent has, because obviously it stifles your ability to make big pushes. You have to it sounds like I said bushes. What? That's not even. Why did I even? The rocket is also going to do a lot of damage on the tower, ladies and gentlemen. So if you get rocket cycled, yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. A giant is a very solid tank that, for only 5 elixir, allows you to play it and not instantly go down a ton of elixir. 5 elixir is recoverable. You can still defend almost any counter push in the game, and oftentimes gets a decent amount of damage considering it's only typically used as a meat shield. Fisherman is great because he does help out on offense and defense. Obviously acts as like a tornado of sorts and can win you entire games because he can pull things in. He can pull himself to buildings. He has enough health to work as like a normal mini tank. Usually you wouldn't want to use him as that, but it's the ability to pull things, activate the King Tower, amazing card. Royal Ghost applies a ton of pressure, has pretty good damage and pretty good health, making him all around a very good mini tank option. Tornado got pretty heavily impacted by its nerf to the damage of the card, however, still does what it needs to do most of the time, making it a pretty solid spell. The Schneeball is really nice because of its knockback effect. It can be used. The downside, obviously, is it doesn't do as much damage as stuff like Zap, and it's not instant, but can be used to win you the entire game sometimes. Snowball is just a really, really solid spell with a lot of knockback, a lot of slow. Love the card. The Skelly King is oftentimes really annoying in those bait decks because you gotta have a response to it. However, sometimes he doesn't do that much damage. But the walking ability paired in the right deck is always a pain to deal with. Although Valkyrie doesn't have a graveyard walking around her, she does more damage. She's good on offense, really good on defense, and has enough health and damage to match up against any card in the game pretty strongly. Graveyard is a very strong win condition, really broken in the meta, definitely needs a nerf, and Graveyard is very, very, very punishing and polarizing to go up against. If you don't have the right cycle of cards, sometimes even if you do, you're still going to end up taking those 1 or 2 bullshit graveyard hits and lose the game. Dark Goggins mentality. The Barb Barrel is really underrated. Getting an extra, like combining 2 cards is like, this is one of the only circumstances where combining 2 cards really works that well, because you get an extra troop for defense and you get practically a log. I guess there's no knockback, but at the same time, this is one of the highest used cards in the game for a reason. Mighty Miner is a very strong champion who's always going to be a massive threat on offense, but at the same time, if you don't have the right card to deal with him on defense, it's really hard to stop him from getting a billion elixirs worth of value. And also, of course, he has that really good getaway bomb. The Prince is, everybody has taken that 1 HP Prince connection, an absolute massive threat on offense. Cannot be ignored, and even when he looks like he's at 1 HP, he's going to get that extra hit. We all know it, and he's very, very difficult to stop, and also pretty decent on defense, although that's his biggest knack. The Goblin Hut went from one of the generational worst cards of all time to a really, really good building that has a lot of health, a lot of pressure, and makes the bait meta even worse because now you have to deal with an extra bait card. And I really like the rework. Maybe could use one more nerf, but it's a pretty solid card. Rage is extremely underrated ever since it did damage. Now the fact that it's able to be used against swarm cards makes it so much better. Really good spell. Fireball is pretty strong. It always gets good value. Ever since I got that knockback nerf 15 business years ago, it's been, you know, not as prominent, but the Fireball is a solid spell. You can't go wrong using it, always gets value. Lightning is really good. Lightning is oftentimes very necessary depending on what Evo is in the meta, because they love releasing Evos that just only die to lightning. And although it got that Crown Tower damage nerf, still does decent Crown Tower damage and also always gets its worth in value and can be really annoying to maybe it needs a radius nerf, to be honest. The Monk, he got a rework. but he's still, the problem is when he takes more damage in his form, the fact of the matter is there's very rare times where he's taking that much damage to have that actually impact how good he is. Still amazing, still a massive threat put in front of things like Royal Giants, and you're always going to be aware if there's a monk in your deck because your support troop cards are instantly going to disapparate. Poison is a really strong spell. It's a little bit more annoying to deal with than the fireball because of how long it lasts, and it's oftentimes going to get a little bit more value than fireball. It's only knack being it does take a while for it to take effect, so some decks that need to kill things quickly can't afford to use a poison. Golden Knight. This card is very, very annoying to go up against. Has seen a massive resurgence in use rate and win percentage after his buff, and consistently does really well and applies crazy value to anybody who has any sort of bait card in their deck. I'd say Queen edges out the Golden Knight by a little bit just because of how good she is at just getting raw damage. The damage is insane, and she's pretty hard to spell as well, so you're gonna need to lightning her or something, which means oftentimes you're always spending more than 5 elixir to counter her. Hog Rider is one of the best win conditions of all time, especially for the whole range of the game. If you look at exclusively top ladder, there are better win conditions, although Hog is always a viable option. Always gets a 1 HP hit, is pretty intuitive to play, and oftentimes the decks are really strong everywhere outside of the top 200. Cannon is the best building in the game. It's cheap, it does a ton of damage, it's fast and easy to cycle, and will oftentimes always be affordable for you to play, and you can pull pretty much anything in the game and cycle multiple of them as well. Ice Spirit is one of the best cards in Clash Royale history. Even after its nerf, it is still fairly strong. It's going to get you that good freeze ability that always helps you out on defense. The Knight is just insane. This card is used in so many decks. It's really, really good. It does good damage, has amazing health, applies a ton of pressure, and it's oftentimes just a card you can fit in any deck in the game, making him one of the best, even if he's not used in every top ladder deck, even though he's used in a lot of them. Guards are insanely strong. They're always going to get more than 3 elixirs worth of value. They obviously can't be spelled and killed, so it makes them really, really strong. And also on offense, they do a ton of damage as well. Very strong swarm card. The Miner is the best win condition in Clash Royale history, in my opinion. The card just is always in top ladder. It's always, there's ability to outplay with it. You can't tell where it's going most of the time unless your opponent choreographs it. So the Miner is just always going to be annoying, guaranteed damage, tanks for things, can be cycled really fast, and even gets used on defense sometimes. Goblin Gang is absolutely insane. This card is beyond broken. Has the air targeting, the ground targeting, can stall out anything in the game, can spell bait, I already mentioned target air. They just do everything. They literally do everything, apply great offensive pressure as well, and absolutely need a nerf. Arrows are the second best card in Clash Royale. They barely compete with the #1 card, or barely are worse than the #1 card, but right now in the bait meta, arrows are really handy, can usually get the job done even as maybe not if you don't have a big spell in your deck, but can pair well with any spell in the game. Always get value, can take annoying cards off the board, and really always just do their job. The Log still just remains the best card in Clash Royale. There's not really a debate. The Log just has a whoppingly like high 35% use rate or something. It's insane. The Log is very good, very strong, and it's always going to be the staple of Clash Royale even after another nerf. Although now, if you have it 1 level under leveled, it's going to struggle to kill things that would usually die to it, like I think princesses and fire. I don't remember all of them because I don't really use Log that much, but it is still the best card in Clash Royale.